This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 142. And today, AC is going to interview Cathy Dew about women in technology, recorded live August the 3rd, 2016. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Microsoft Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, and the competitive landscape and related technologies. Just the information, no marketing, no BS. I'm Andrew Connell.
And I'm Chris Johnson.
Send us a tweet either to the show at MS Cloud Show or to Andrew at Andrew Connell.
Or Chris at LoungeFlyZ.
As we'd love to connect with you. We're just two dudes telling you how we see it. The Microsoft Cloud Show is sponsored by ValidNL. Valid is a Microsoft Gold partner whose mission is to enable its customers to excel in their business through the innovative use of technology. Valid is always on the lookout for consultants, architects, and engineers. Do you know Azure, Business Intelligence and Analytics, .NET, Office 365, or SharePoint? Look them up on valid.nl. Well, hello, everybody. Today is a solo show, or not so much a solo show, because we have a guest on the show today. But today it's just me. It's just AC. CJ decided to bail on us today. No, not being serious there. He was unable to join us today at the last minute due to something that came up with work. But that's quite all right. We can definitely hold down the fort without CJ. Today's episode is going to be, we're going to have an interview with Cathy Dew about women in technology. Diversity in the workforce is definitely something that I feel is has always been, I guess you could say, is almost frustrating. I've always kind of hated the fact that, when you think about a lot of times in the workforce that I look at myself and say, well, I don't like the fact that I'm always the stereotype, or I feel like a stereotype for what's in the current technology workforce, being a white guy not having as much diversity and not working with as many people of different race and culture and between men and women and different religions and stuff. So, and from different countries. And so I happened to be sitting down I was at a conference at the SP TechCon conference up in Boston about a month or two ago, I think in June. And have it around just like every conference after, the show during the day and everybody's been out to dinner. Sometimes kind of meet back up at a local watering hole, or in this case, we've got a decent bar that was in the hotel, and we're all just kind of shooting the breeze and I think enjoying our desserts that we had picked up from Little Italy or the North End in Boston. And I had started to have a conversation with Cathy and with Eric Schups. And Cathy's been involved, as we'll get into in just a minute, with women in technology and specifically also with women in SharePoint for quite a while. And there's a luncheon that's always held at SP TechCon and some other conferences as well. Eric was on a panel with Cathy at another conference, on a virtual conference, I believe it was, for ITUnity a couple months earlier. And we started getting on the whole topic of women in technology, women in SharePoint. And I found it really interesting to hear some of the comments that Eric had about things that were very enlightening or very eye-opening to him that he felt like he was just completely ignorant to or completely out of it with. And so got us talking, got Cathy and I talking to CJ, and we thought it'd be really cool to have a episode on this topic. So today, after we're trying to play with schedules for quite a while, we were able to make it work, and we got Cathy on the show today. So Cathy Dew is an enterprise delivery manager at Planet Technologies, a graphic designer, and a SharePoint MVP based out of Huntsville, Alabama. Great NASA spot there. While previously she focused on primarily a background on branding and user experience and how it relates to the SharePoint platform, she currently works with SharePoint from an enterprise solution perspective, focusing on the business analyst perspective, defining requirements and governance as needed, while focusing on all the products for Office 365 and Azure. Over the past 8 years, Cathy has worked to become an advocate for women in technology by founding the Women in SharePoint groups, expanding out to women in technology on ITUnity, and pushing for gender equality and ways to support women in technology. So allow me to welcome Cathy Dew to the show. So Cathy, how are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm so happy that we're finally able to get the schedules aligned to record this show today.
I completely agree. This is one I've been looking forward to I've been really excited and looking forward to this for a while. And I'm really, really eager to see the response that we get from our listeners about this. We recently did a survey of our listeners, and the one thing that I forgot to ask that I was curious on, we can get details on when people download the show from like a reverse geocode of their IP address and figure out what countries they're from and what devices they use. And So then we started asking questions like, do you identify as a developer or an IT pro or an administrator, or what do you identify yourself as? And then right after we started getting the responses back, I did a complete head slap and realized I was also curious if we had what the breakdown was on gender was for listeners of our show. So complete fail on my part.
It happens. It's kind of that one thing that a lot of times we don't think about, and then we're always curious about later. And it's just kind of that we don't want it to be a factor, but it is a factor.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing that was so eye-opening to me when we first, I've talked to you about this, I guess, off and on. We've been friends for years. And I've talked to you about this kind of off and on about women in the workplace or gender equality and just the general diversity topic when it comes to our workspace and the technology workspace. And I think that what was so eye-opening to me, a lot of times you bring up a lot of comments and shared your experiences that you had at the last Women in SharePoint or Women in Technology Luncheon at SP TechCon. And not only was it eye-opening to me, but it's one of those things, I guess, complete honesty is I almost feel like I'm a little sensitive in talking about it at times because I feel like I'm almost, I don't want to say it's like a jerk, but you almost kind of feel like if I'm so surprised by it, then I don't see the issue. Then does that mean that I've got my head stuck in the sand? But then when we were sitting there that night at SP TechCon and I saw Eric Sheps's reaction, I'm like, okay, you know what? I don't feel like I'm a complete idiot. Now I know that even if I am a complete idiot, that Eric is as well.
Yeah.
So, that might be true too, Eric. I'm just kidding, man. Good guy. But I'm just we ought to talk about this. We ought to bring this on the show and kind of bring it up. So I'm curious to kind of see where we go with this. And we got some things that we definitely like to talk about here, but why don't we start? Let's kind of reset here. How did you get into IT, and what were your initial experiences just in general?
Yeah, it was kind of a strange path that I took coming into the IT world. I went to college to become a graphic designer. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in painting and graphic design. And so it was kind of, I went and worked in advertising, and I used to design billboards and annual reports and business cards and logos, and that was my world. And I lived in Houston, Texas at the time, and I wanted to come home to Alabama. I'm a country girl at heart. And so I moved back to Alabama, and I started working in marketing for an IT consulting firm. And I like to think that I made a pretty distinct choice to not work in the technology field when I went to art school. My father's a retired computer science professor, so I was very much exposed to computers and programming and code from a very young age. We had one of the very first Apple computers. We had the first Mac. That's what I, learned to work on. People are always surprised by the speed that I can type, but I always kind of chuckle and tell them, well, this is what happens when you're not allowed to really play video games, and your video game is Mavis Beacon Teaches Typing on a computer with the keyboard hidden under a desk. And that was what I was given as a game to play as a kid on that old box Mac, right? The very first Mac. Yeah. And so I like to think I make it a very logical choice. So I came to work as a marketing person, designer for an IT consulting firm in Birmingham, Alabama. And during the course of time there, I think I was about 2 weeks into it, and they came to me and said, we want to redo our web presence, and we want to put it on this thing called SharePoint. And it's not traditional web development, and it's, by the way, in beta, and can you go figure it out? And so a month later, we had a live public-facing website, which the company then started using to advertise customization to their customers, which the logical transition over to them selling my skill set to me transitioning to an IT consultant. It was a very interesting transition for me. When I switched over to become a consultant for that company, my boss at the time was the head of finance, and he made me promise to give him 3 months without quitting to give it a shot, which should have given me the clue that I needed that this was going to be a very difficult new manager. Right away, I had a new manager who I walked into. He set up a meeting with me, and in that meeting, he asked me a series of 5 or 6 questions, and the one that shocked me the most was he asked me on a scale from 1 to 10, how likely was I to cry in the office?
Oh my God.
And I'm pretty sure he never asked any of my male coworkers this because I asked most of them. And to this day, my biggest regret is that I didn't break into giant alligator tears right there and be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm gonna cry. Right? Because that was just such an unrealistic question to ask somebody. And I never had encountered that ever. And so that was kind of like my first exposure into the IT consulting world.
Jeez.
And it shocked me. And it kind of made me go like, is this normal? And so that was kind of my entry into it. And then over the years, I've experienced a lot of different things. And, working in the SharePoint community, we have really great men in our community. But I would say living in the South, it's a slightly different mentality. But for a long time, I didn't know if what I was experiencing was because I do choose to live in the deep South of the United States in an environment that is very traditional role-based and very male-based and focused, or if it was more broad spread. And it wasn't until I started meeting different women from around the country and around the world and talking to them that I realized that this was an issue that people weren't talking about, and that a lot of women felt alone, and they didn't have anybody that was out there saying, this happens and this is wrong. And that's what I've been trying to do by founding the groups and setting up different ways and channels to support and just to kind of tell the story. And I think that's the thing that strikes me the most when I do these events. The latest SP TechCon event, when I did the luncheon there, when I gave my speech there, I think it's always a good kind of keynote talk when you can make people laugh, cry, and clap all in the same 20-minute period. And, to have women come up to me at the end, and I had one woman who came up to me and she said, I've been working in technology for 30 years and I didn't know it was okay to talk about what really happens.
I'm so glad you shared this. You shared that experience from the last SP TechCon and someone coming up after you and the way you described the keynote and everything. I really wanted you to share that with our listeners too, because that was, I think that when you said that to me, my jaw hit the ground. It floors me that, granted, I'm a man, so I don't see as much of the stuff going on because it's not directed at me. And let's face it, that a lot of the places that we work, at least a lot of places that I've worked in the past, there aren't a lot of women in technology and the places that I've worked. And so I don't see that as much. But I do see, like you say, in the SharePoint community that we've been in and stuff, there is a lot more diversity. There's a lot more diversity in terms of like the people that we run with, like a lot of the speakers and a lot of the organizers and stuff. And so I see that diversity, but then I also see the negative side too, where you see some of the attendees where if there's 2 or 3 of us standing around, that a guy is going to ask me, generally will ask me a question and doesn't turn around and ask you the exact same question.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I will say that for me lately, I've been struggling with that a lot, is the perception of value. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is the way that women interpret words are different than how a male would interpret words, but also the way that people describe females is different than how they would describe males. So to give you an example, the things that I've been struggling with lately, I do user experience design, which past was all HTML, CSS, colors and shapes and pretty pictures. And now within Microsoft and within a lot of web technology, it's much more heavily developer focused. And one of the things I struggle with is getting people to recognize that I'm capable of doing that, and that I do write JavaScript code, and that I can download things from GitHub and I have an account. And it's one of those things as a perception, and I see this in the broader community as well, that I struggle with. And the other piece of this is the labels. So over the last year, I've really struggled with whether or not I wanted to even continue as an IT consultant. And part of that is because I've had a number of labels kind of assigned to me by management to tell me that I'm difficult to work with. And so, getting a label like you're too aggressive is a really difficult thing for a woman to deal with, because I'm pretty sure that if a male was doing the exact same thing I was doing, he'd be, confident, but I'm labeled as aggressive.
I've heard that same thing. I've heard that from other people too, that when you have the exact same attitude or the exact same approach to something, either being a man or a woman, is perceived as different things. You get you see someone being like, most people you would say with that attitude, that person's confident, but they look at it from a woman and say, well, you shouldn't, I guess their their biases, maybe that's subconscious, but their biases are going to be more that's not confidence, that's just being hard to work with, or that's being more challenging than it is in being confident.
If I had a penny for every time someone had called me a bitch, I'd be a very rich woman and I wouldn't have to work anymore.
Oh man.
In workplace environments, I've even had it told, said, you're such a bitch in a phone call, like a call, not with a customer on it, but an internal call before. And I mean, I think it's why is it acceptable for people to say that to a coworker? It's just not.
Well, it's not. Yeah, I would challenge that and just say it right away. It's not. That's not acceptable at all. It's just. I think it's interesting though that it's interesting how often it happens and how widespread it happens. Yeah. That you don't end up hearing about it. And I mean, then the times that you do end up hearing about it, there's usually a bit of an uproar about the pay equality and stuff. I mean, we even saw like the last week I think that Massachusetts just passed a law on. The goal of it was to stem the gender inequality of pay. I think is a good way to say it. They're trying to keep it where how there's a pay gap between men and women.
Yes.
And they just passed a law that made it illegal for an employer to ask you what you made at your previous job, and instead they have to offer you a rate that is of what the company values you at and not based on what you previously made.
Right. That's a tricky thing though too. I mean, all of the gender equality pay issues, I mean, I think it's great that one of the first things we notice is that people are acknowledging that it exists, because it does exist. And it's something that as a female, it tends to make us feel less valuable. And I think that's one of the, I know having Eric, when I asked him to be a part of the Women in Technology panel for the ITUnity Connect conference, he was like, why are you, I'm male. And I was like, he's one of my greatest supporters and encouragers to, speak and get out there. And I wanted him to not just experience it, but to be able to provide his perspective into the conversation. And that's something I'm trying to do more and more of, is expand the people that the message is going to, because it's definitely something that a lot of people are interested in. A lot of men have daughters and they want their daughters to have a better opportunity for work and an equal employment than their peers have. And that's definitely something that the only way to do this is to acknowledge that it exists right now. And it's really good to see that happening with the pay perspective. And then I'm hoping that it continues to happen from the ways that people are described or valued and all of this as well. Yeah,
it's funny you say that, because I'm definitely in that situation as well. Now, I have a daughter, she's 7 years old, and I have seen a lot of things come up of different activities and things that she's wanted to do. And people have, let's say, somebody older, so let's say someone like my parents' age, or an aunt or an uncle or a cousin or somebody, and she would express interest that she'd want to do something, and it would almost kind of be, I don't want to say blown off, but it wouldn't be taken as seriously.
Yeah.
And I'd see different things like that. And as a dad, I mean, I'm hypersensitive to the amount of time that my kids spend in front of a screen, because I spend my entire life in front of a screen. And so I'm like, I don't want you guys I don't want to push you in the direction of where I want you to go. I want you to kind of find your own direction. I just want to expose you to things. But with her, I mean, too, I look at it and I get flat out pissed when I see things like going, oh, yeah, well, Catherine's not going to be interested in doing that. I'm like, why not? And he goes, oh, well, that's like a little boy's thing. I'm like, yeah, that doesn't fly with me. So, it's funny, too, that you say this, because I put out a request for anybody. I let people know that we were going to be doing this interview today. And we put an email out to all of our listeners and also put it up on Twitter. And I know you did the same as well. And we got a handful of questions back. And I think it's funny because all the questions I got back were from men. I was a little disappointed in that, but granted, at least the men are asking questions about it.
Yeah.
But all of the questions I got back had something to do with these guys' daughters.
Right.
And something about it. So, I mean, like, from one question here was from like Steve Mushcat. Sorry if I messed up your name there, Stephen. But Stephen Mushcat, which I got to commend you. You spell your first name is spelled the same way my son does, not with a PH, but with a V. Stephen had a question here. He said, here's his question for Cathy. My daughter's 14 years old, starting high school this year. She's unfortunately not too interested in coding. She did some Arduino projects and enjoyed it. Maybe there's hope, but she has an interest in science, particularly chemistry. His question isn't so much directed at her, but more to him. As her dad, how can I help nurture this interest and help her succeed in a science-related field? And I know that I wanted to talk to you a little bit too about this whole, not just women in IT, but also women in STEM and the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, I think is what it stands for.
Yes, it is.
So what would you say to Stephen there? How do you see, like, is there a difference between IT and STEM based things, or do you see it all as kind of one thing? And how would you kind of suggest people, address that?
I tend to see it as one kind of thing. I think IT is just a different kind of branch off of the science and engineering component of this, the technology component of STEM. And what I often encourage people to do, because when they hit high school is the critical age, and it's the age where really social media starts to define girls' existence. And girls are slightly different from males in that we're always looking for peer approval in some way, at least from my perception. Myself, I tend to do that. And I have a friend who's a high school teacher, and I see this happening with her students. So for dads, what I like to encourage them is get involved at the school. Make sure the school offers opportunities for females. And a lot of times what that means is weekend or after school activities that are only females in attendance. And the reason for that is because you noticed it right away with the questions you got. All the questions you got were from men. Women are afraid to ask their questions. They don't want to come out. And it's the same thing, especially with high school girls. Get involved, offer to lead a class, do whatever, get some kind of activity that helps to encourage that and make it female focused.
That's interesting. I sent, first of all, it's good to hear you say that, because I look back at some stuff that I've done the last 2 years. I'm like, oh, sweet, that's what I've done. My school, where my kids go, it's a STEM focused, it's a public school. It's got a STEM emphasis to it. And I've volunteered. We generally don't have parents come in and do like volunteer presentations for the younger grades. So like my daughter was for kindergarten, first grade, but when my son was like third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, I offered to come in. They took me up on it, and I would do something like talking about computers, or I'd be talking about a Raspberry Pi and stuff. And as a sidebar, I can tell you, as someone who's gotten in front and spoken at conferences with thousands of people in the audience, by far the hardest presentation I've ever had to give was when there were 18 fourth graders in the room.
100%. It's always harder.
I was sweating like crazy. That I told the teacher, told the teacher, I was like, go behind me and look at my back. And she looked at my back, and my shirt was completely soaked. And I was so conscious, not even turning around for the kids to see that. One of the things that really struck me from that is that I saw of the girls that were in the room, these are fourth graders, of the girls that were in the room, I saw more of the girls as a whole interested in what I was talking about than more of than the same number of boys that were interested in it. And so, I mean, from my small, experiments that I've had and talking to different dads that are in the same kind of boat that I'm in, or presenting or talking to people at my son's school, at my kid's school. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Maybe I'm looking at it from way too a small microcosm, but I get that there is an issue in the business, I don't think it's something that's going to change overnight.
No,
but it's something that I'm starting to see from the younger generation.
100%.
That I'm seeing the change there. It's just one of those things that I feel like, this might be a controversial statement as well, but I kind of saw the same thing with racism, where I think that, people that are my parents' age, there's a lot more racism if you look at it on a percentage of a whole than there is at my age. And I look at my kids' age, and they really don't, my kids don't even see it.
They don't see it, yeah.
If there's somebody in their class or somebody, I know people that are still going to say, oh, talking about people in their class, they say, oh, like the black guy or the white guy, or they refer to it that way. But instead, my kids are talking about the color of the hair of their shirts, their shirt collars.
Yeah.
Which, I look at that, my wife and I look at it, and I'm just like, that's the coolest thing. Like, they're describing a couple. There's a swim team that they're on, and it's mostly white kids that are on the swim team. But my son is friends with a boy that's on the team who is not white, and I couldn't figure out who he was talking about one day, but the way he was describing him was not at all by his skin color. It was just like, once I realized who it was.
Yeah, descriptive of the kid.
Yeah, it was just, it brought a smile to my face. So I wonder if that, do we see that same kind of thing potentially happening with gender as well? Like the younger generation, it's because people our age are more aware of it, and we're making sure that we don't draw those distinctions for the kids that are younger that are coming up.
I hope it happens. I really do, but I don't see it happening right now.
Okay.
What I see is that the younger the kids are, so elementary, middle school age, they're less defined by what their peers think of them. So girls are a lot more interested and open about showing their interest in STEM ideas and concepts and activities. But once they hit high school, where they're looking for peer interaction and approval and, social media and what happens on commercials and TV, because think about it as the age also that they start to get more freedom with what they can watch and what they can browse and devices that they can do things with. That's when it starts to drop off. And the saddest component of it for me, and one of the things that I try to advocate for, I speak at high schools and things like that to encourage girls, about a career in IT. And I tell them, you can come into IT from anything. I have an art degree. And so there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of variability, but the drop off starts to happen in high school, and it definitely occurs in college. We definitely have a smallest number of females entering into STEM degree programs as ever before. And it's something that we need to see changed. And I'm hoping that it changes. And that a lot of you guys who are dads who have daughters are helping with that right now, just by being curious, asking the questions, listening to shows like this to understand it. One of the things I encourage dads when they hit college age and high school age, if you have a daughter that's interested in anything like this. I was having a discussion at a conference with a gentleman whose daughter was a junior in high school and wants to get a computer science degree. And he was asking me, what should I be looking for in a college? And I have a little bit of insight in this because my dad is a retired college professor in a computer science department. He actually founded an information technology department for the University of South Alabama. And in this, what I like to tell them is don't ask the college departments how many females they have in their program. Ask them how many females graduate with the degree. Because the entry numbers are usually a lot larger than the graduation numbers because they get into it, it gets harder, whether it's bias or whatever happens, they get discouraged and they switch majors. So you want to be looking at the STEM fields for college for your daughters and asking the question of not how many females do you have in the program, but how many females graduate from the program.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I was going to ask, one of the other things that I saw come up from the questions that were submitted, I want to read 3 of these off to you really quick because this is something I definitely wanted to come back to you with. So one of them, again, was from Gavin Barron, who submitted a question. He said, hey, Cathy, what do you think of organizers of user groups or meetups? What do you think that they could do to help encourage more women to attend and get involved in technology-related communities? I'm consistently impressed with some of the great women I get to work with and community leaders I meet. And I would like to help foster more women in tech to make this world a better place for my daughter. And then, again, another question that was submitted was by, oh boy, this is a fun last name. Paul, I hope I get this right. Paul Schnackenberg. I think that's right. Sorry, Paul, if I messed that up. But he asked, what can, I think he's from Australia or New Zealand. He said, what can us blokes do in IT companies to ensure there's more diversity in the IT industry? So like if somebody like me, if I look at this and I say, yeah, I recognize that there's something going on here. I recognize that there's work that can definitely be done. I know, things that you're doing, like with the Women in Technology luncheons and Women in SharePoint group and stuff. I see the stuff that you're doing. And aside from me saying that, yes, I support what you're doing. And yes, that, I've always wanted to kind of poke my head in the back of the room at the Women in Technology luncheon because I've always just been fascinated and curious what goes on behind those doors. But I didn't want to walk in and get my head bitten off without asking for permission from you first.
We're trying to change that for SP TechCon in San Francisco. We're trying to have just a panel discussion that happens for everyone.
That's all. Yeah.
Not just female focused.
So what would you say people like me, what would you suggest? What can we do? What can we do to help with this that we wanted to make a difference?
So this is a good one. And this is one that there's a lot of people that work hard on this, and there's a lot of things that you can do. The fastest and easiest way for both community and for within your company is to mentor a female. And when I say that is just to give them a nice place to have conversations, to talk about things that they could do differently, to ask those questions. Because a lot of times, and I'll use an example of this. A lot of times, like I've said, females don't know who to talk to. I know myself, I mentor quite a lot of people, and I make myself readily available to any female that's having issues in the workplace, that they can reach out to me for support, or anybody who just has career curiosity or wants to make a change, that they can reach out to me. On that same ITUnity panel, and I think this was the one, and this was the only time that I have stopped everyone on the panel to address a comment that came in. We had a chat window going during that conversation, and we had a woman who was talking about her very negative work environment. She actually wrote out something and she said, "I'm very discouraged because my boss told me that if I didn't have gastric bypass surgery, I would not be able to be in front of customers anymore." And that was the only time I've ever stopped a panel conversation to address something. And her getting the support from that immediately, I gave her my email address, told her to send me her resume, and within a month, she already had a new job.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so fantastic, but we had to build her up a little bit, right? So some things that are said are not nearly that obvious, but having a mentor from a speaking perspective to kind of validate that, yes, this is good, or get up there and do it, co-present with a female to get them into it, set it up, do in a community perspective, make an initiative within your group that you're going to do an equal number of male and female speakers and make that happen. I know that's what a lot of community organizers do. I know, again, Eric Schups has been doing this for years, and I know he's gotten a lot of blowback on his SharePoint Saturday events that he's run by he has an equal number of male and female speakers. I've seen the number of females grow substantially at conferences and events. And so I see this as already happening in some ways. And for men, just to have the conversations, to ask a female that you work with, what can I do differently? How can I help? Is there anything I can do to help? It works wonders. Because like I said, a lot of females are the single female in an IT shop, and they don't have another female to talk to, and they don't always need another female to talk to, but they need to have people asking them, what can I do differently? What can I help? How can I help?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know that there's also, I'm aware of another campaign that's working on. It's the IStandByYou. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this is?
So like I said, over the last year, I really struggled with, was I going to continue my career in IT and as a consultant? And one of the things that I realize is that the only way that we can make change happen is to be the change you want to see in the world. That's one of my favorite quotes. So what I started in July or June at the SP TechCon event was our official launch date, was we started a marketing campaign called the IStandByYou campaign. It's #IStandByYou. And you can find out all kinds of information on it at the ITUnity site and Women in SharePoint. So I will give those URLs to AC so he can put them in the podcast here. But it's basically asking people to make a pledge for something that you're going to do over the next 365 days to be the change you want to see for women in technology. So we've got blogs that could be written, and we've already started seeing those come in. Things like being a mentor. I've connected people as mentors by people saying, hey, I'm looking for a mentor, and people volunteering to be a mentor through this. There's an online submission form, and you can simply go to the Women in SharePoint website and fill out the online submission form. We've started getting some in. We ask if you are okay with us posting them. So we're going to start posting out some of the submissions that we're getting from people. And we're just looking for you to do something, and no matter how big or small, over the next 365 days to be the change you want to see in our world for women in technology.
That's awesome. So I have a question for you, a hard one then for you.
Okay.
What's your I Stand By You commitment that you have?
This was a really hard one for me because it seems like it would be so obvious, but I've already run women in technology groups. At every conference I speak at, I go to the organizers and ask, are they doing a women in technology event? At SP TechCon, I've been doing on my own dime, for the most part, flying to SP TechCon events twice a year for the last 7 years to host the luncheons. So it wasn't an obvious pledge choice for me. So what I've decided to do is to start a woman in technology focused podcast.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's well. I guess it was a bit of a baited question because I knew you were going to say that. But one of the things that we talked about that I guess that we talked about when we were at SP TechCon was getting you on to do an interview, and then the more I just kind of sat there in the speaker room, we were just chatting. Back in my head, I'm like, you would be awesome on a podcast. Yeah. You'd be absolutely awesome, not just for one episode, but you'd be awesome. This is like you said, this is a big topic.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things that we could talk about with this. I was struggling to going, what do we talk about in a span of 45 minutes? In terms of we've got way too much to talk about in 45 minutes. How do we do this? So I know you and I have had these conversations in the background and stuff about getting a podcast stood up. And so I know one of the things that I guess I can tell you what my commitment is going to be for an I Stand By You and what we're doing, maybe me as the podcast or CJ and I as the podcast. I'm not sure how to describe it, but I know what CJ and I want to do is we want to help get this thing off the ground. So we have a show clearly we have a show and we've got a process wrapped around it it works really well for us for getting the show up and running and making it really, really simple once we get the first pieces up off the ground. So the commitment that we have to the I Stand By You campaign and what CJ and I are going to do is that we are going to help you get this podcast up off the ground to make it incredibly easy for you to record shows on whatever the cadence is that you want to do it on, to get these out there so that you have ownership of the show. We want you to be able to run this whole thing going forward and being in the right spot and owning all the content and stuff. So we definitely want to support this and help it because I think that one of the themes I hear you saying is that what's going to help with this is to have the conversation just continue and don't stop and just keep doing just do what we're doing, but keep doing it more and more and more.
Yes.
And so hearing that's what I want to help you do is I want to help get this thing off the ground and let's get it going. So I know that the campaign is 365 days, what we're going to do over the next 365 days. I hope that we can do a little bit better than that, than just going till August the 3rd of 2017. Hopefully we can get this launched a whole lot sooner than that. So listeners to our show, definitely listen to our show because we will definitely be letting everyone know about, once Cathy gets her show up and running.
Yeah, and we're really excited for it. It won't just be myself, but it'll be a lot of the other women in technology leaders in my realm of world. So it will be Heather Newman and Jennifer Mason Roth. Sorry, I always put that backwards.
I was so glad to hear someone else did that too, because I do that all the time.
I always do that backwards, and so I feel bad. Sorry, Corey. And Lori Gowan. And so it's a matter of, we'll have a variety of topics. We'll do some that will be more technical focused, and we're going to interview a lot of women in technology and get their perspective on, what do they do and how do they work. And then with Heather as well, we'll be able to chief marketing officers and a lot of other people as well. So I'll be the consistent presence, but then I'll have co-hosts rotate in and we'll do all kinds of different things focused across all technologies.
Awesome.
So not just SharePoint. And we're tentatively calling it Speaking with Wit. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to getting this one up off the ground because this is going to be, I'm really curious to hear, like I said at the beginning of the show, I wouldn't even say curious, I'm fascinated to find out the reaction that we get from this discussion that we have when we publish this episode. And I always get surprised when I see some of the reactions that come back from these from these episodes and seeing what people, jumping in, what can I do to help and stuff like that. So if anybody that is listening to the show here and they are wondering, how can I throw my support behind this? What can I do? What would you, if you, at an absolute minimum, go through and tweet about this show and talk about episode 142 on the MS Cloud show on Twitter or something. But, how can they also go to to help what you're doing here? What can they do to help you, Cathy?
So first off, make a pledge. We're asking not just individuals, but corporations and businesses as well. So make a pledge for yourself. Get your employer to make a pledge. Find a way to do something, no matter how big or small. I've had pledges come in that I'm going to write a blog post, or I'm going to teach my daughter how to do this particular code thing. It doesn't matter what it is, but do something over the next 365 days. Put your pledge out there for us. Go to the Women in SharePoint site and make your pledge there on the campaign. Be aware of what's happening. And, if you see something that you're not happy with, talk about it. You can always easily find me. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm CatPaint1 on Twitter. That's one of the fastest ways to get in touch with me. Any of the contact information on the Women in SharePoint site or the Women in Technology on ITUnity community all comes to me. So pretty easy to get a hold of me. So reach out to me if you have a question or something you want to do or just need more information. I'm always happy to have these conversations. And it's something that I'm very passionate about is trying to make this change happen.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
So this can always sound kind of beta, but I'm curious about this. This was one of the things we talked about previously, so I'm not sandbagging you. What do you see? What kind of changes have you seen, aside from the ones that we've talked about people, coming up and talking to you from the different panels and luncheons that you've run, about them saying, I didn't know that you could talk about these things or be as open about those things. What kind of changes have you seen specifically for women around IT? Things like, I'm going to say a stupid one here, like maybe even longer lines at a bathroom at the conference for the women's restroom. So more speakers, things like that.
So it's a really interesting one. I've been doing SharePoint and really involved in the community for 8 years now. And the first few years that I was out doing this, and I've been doing the Women in SharePoint lunches at SP TechCon for 7. And the first few times we did this, and like the first Microsoft conferences I would go to, the SharePoint conference and all of that, they would literally close off women's restrooms and make them men's restrooms.
Seriously?
Yes, they would mark them out as women and make it a men's room because the men's lines were so long and there were so few females. So they would literally mark off men's restrooms and make them, or women's restrooms and make them men's. So the women would have to walk even further to get to a restroom because they would usually do that really close to the expo halls and everything. And you'd have to go further down to find a women's room. That doesn't happen as much anymore. We do still get a chuckle out of seeing all the men in line to go to the restroom when we go to big conferences like that.
Oh my God. I can't believe, I'm floored. My jaw's on the ground right now. I cannot believe that.
Women always have to wait in line. So it's always kind of amusing to us when it's a long line of men waiting in line to go to the restroom. But yeah, I used to see that a lot. I didn't see that at the Ignite conference last year other than once. And it was at the evening party event. They did take one of the women's restrooms and make it a men's room because they were just, the number of men at the conferences far outweighs the number of women.
I'm floored. I'm floored by that. I mean, I've been there have been times when that specific issue around the bathroom lines. As a speaker, I know that it's sometimes when you have 2 sessions, you have to give back to back. That's when everybody from the conference is ducking in the restroom, so the lines are real long. So I've been frustrated at times, going, well, I got to get in the restroom and I'm going to be quick, but I got to get in and I got to get out because I've only got 15 minutes to not only use the restroom between 2 sessions, but also switch the whole session from one session to the next session.
Yeah.
So, I've had times where I've had one of the people who are one of the staff for the conference actually hold people from going in one of the women's bathrooms so I could duck in there real quick and go use the restroom and get out because that was the one that didn't have any lines.
Yeah.
But I can't believe shutting a whole one off though I guess it was shut off for me, so I really shouldn't have said that. But shutting a whole one off, though, that blows my mind.
Yeah. I've seen it happen less and less over the years, but it did happen a lot. The first couple of, I think the 2007 SharePoint conference in Vegas, I saw lots of women's rooms turned into men's. So I don't see that happening as much anymore. We started our Women in SharePoint luncheons at SP TechCon with, I think, 45 people in our first one. And our last one in Boston had over 100 women in it, I think 135. So we've seen the number of females attending conferences rise. I've seen the number of female speakers speaking at conferences rise. I've seen the awareness of the need for women in technology events grow exponentially. And this is something I actually do commend Microsoft on. I don't know, a lot of people haven't been made aware of all the things that Microsoft is doing at the upcoming Ignite show for women in technology. They're doing a luncheon, they're doing an evening meetup event, and they're doing like a panel discussion. So they have 3 different events. And then also one of the things that I'm speaking on there is I'm hosting a Women in SharePoint meetup. So to talk a bit more about the IStandByYou campaign. And so submitted that to Microsoft and they accepted it. So the fact that they're acknowledging that and growing, I know the last SharePoint conference that they did, the one that was out at, I can't even remember. It was in Vegas. The very last SharePoint focused conference, I begged and pleaded to get a Women in Technology, Women in SharePoint luncheon, and they actually allowed me to help plan it. And they turned away more women than they made room for. And it was very eye-opening to the people in charge because of the number of females that wanted to attend the luncheon and that could not. And so I'm really happy to see their involvement increase and them setting that up for success now. So I definitely am seeing changes happen, and seeing it just thrills me every time I go to an event and see more and more women there. And I try to do things like the Women in SharePoint meetups so that people can meet each other early in the conference, so that when you're walking through the big lunch halls and everything, you see somebody to sit with, somebody you recognize, you can meet up with people, because it's overwhelming to be a female in that large of a male crowd.
Oh, I would imagine. I would absolutely imagine. It's good to hear that things are actually changing, that the companies like Microsoft are stepping up and making much more space for it. They're becoming much more aware of it. Not only that there's an ask for it, but there's also a reaction to it, that when those environments, when those opportunities are actually given, that you have that they're seeing the reaction that comes back from them. So it's good to see that people are taking advantage of those opportunities so that they'll continue to do so. Other companies hopefully at other conferences will follow suit, and other different events will follow suit, and even double down on what their investments have already been. So
yeah, I definitely see that change happening, and it's really thrilling for me to see, just from a sheer number of females attending events increasing and feeling comfortable going to more tech-focused events just thrills me.
That's awesome. I know there was another conference that I was involved in. It's the first time that I'd actually heard about this. I wasn't aware that Eric Schups did this for his user group, but last year, I think it was, in 2015, I spoke at a conference called NGConf, an Angular conference.
Yes.
And it's not it sounds like it is. It's not a Google run conference. It's an independent show that's just sponsored by Google. And they actually made a point to earmark, I think 50% or a significant percentage of sessions that were presented by women and not presented by men. They even said, we got tons of great submissions, but this is something that's very important to us. We want to do, and we want to make sure that we have equal representation on the stage. And it was really cool to see. It's me not seeing as much of the issue here, but I remember, sitting through the conference and watching the attendance, or watching the speakers. I don't really pick up on if it's a man or a woman that's actually presenting. I do. It's not like it's hard to tell that it's a man or a woman, right? But it doesn't make a stand of me like going, oh, look, here's a woman presenter. It's more like, oh, here's a presenter. Oh, she happens to be a woman. But it's not something that would kind of stand out to me. I heard about that after the conference. And actually another one that I went to for a little startup and business thing, they popped up with that same thing. And they're like going, yeah, we made a point to do this. And to kind of think back at it going, yeah, it was a pretty good mix there, but didn't really pick up on it. So hopefully other people are starting to have those same kind of, non-perceptions.
I think one of the reasons you don't notice it as much is that there's a large number of females speaking in SharePoint. And so the number of female to male speakers is usually pretty fair at a lot of events. The ones that it doesn't happen at. It's my one complaint about the Ignite show is that I wish there were more females from a technical perspective speaking, community females speaking on more technical topics, a little bit more beyond the business.
That's interesting.
I wish there was a female developer on the stage from the SharePoint community.
I didn't realize there was. I guess my pot shot to the Ignite conference is that there's hardly any developer sessions for SharePoint. So I don't, it was hard to get, it's hard to get diversity there when there's only a few sessions anyway too. So, right. So
it's very true. It's very true. I'm going and speaking all on community stuff. I'm doing Women in SharePoint, user experience design, meetup. All of my sessions are completely community focused.
Hey, there is one thing I did want to mention here that I'd be remiss in mentioning this. I wasn't aware of this. This was actually submitted by one of our listener questions by Paul. So just try it again. Schnackenberg. Yeah, Schnackenberg. Paul told me about this story here, and I wasn't aware of this. I'm curious if you had heard of this, but he says you also might want to look at a site called Textio.com. That's TEXTIO.com. It was a startup created by an ex-Microsoft lady. I think her name is pronounced Kieran Snyder, who analyzed written performance reviews when she was at Microsoft, finding a lot of unconscious bias in the wording and when the review was about female employees. So her company, Textio, offers a service that does bias checking on your job ads and other text instead of spelling and grammar checking. And the lady who ran the HoloLens team, who I think her name was Donna Sarkar, she used it to hire a more diverse set of engineers when she built the HoloLens team. He got all this from a presentation that Donna gave at WP’16. So that was just a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if they have the videos of the sessions recorded and posted somewhere like Channel 9, but her session was called 10 Women Who Are Changing the World. Yeah. Did you see that session?
I haven't seen the session, but I've heard about the session from a lot of people that were in attendance, and I knew about the service that she's created. So working for that IT consulting firm in the marketing department, one of the things that I did was work with the recruiting team on how they wrote their job advertisements. There are a lot of words that get put into job ads that seemingly that make women uncomfortable to apply for them. And so it's a great service that she offers to scan for those gender bias ways in job ads. I think that's a fantastic service, and I wish more people used it.
I'll have to go back and try and see if I can find if this session was recorded. I went back and looked for it, and I couldn't. I just did a couple quick searches while we're talking here, and I don't see it showing up. But again, I wasn't at WP’16, and I'm not entirely sure if sessions were recorded, and if they were, where they're posted. So if I do find it after we get off the show, I'll definitely make sure that it's in the show notes so that people can go take a look at it. But I don't know where the sessions are either. I think they were recorded, but I don't know how they're making them available. Yeah, all my searches, this isn't good because all the WP’16 searches I'm coming with are from the White Privilege Conference. That's not what I want to see. No. Throw Microsoft behind that search. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's coming from Google, so hopefully Bing's got a better result there. Anyway, well, cool. Well, Cathy, is there anything else that you wanted to share with our listeners before we wrap this up? I mean, for me, I'm just thrilled that we had this conversation and that we've gone ahead and put this first kind of conversation out there and looking ahead towards the new podcast that we're going to be putting together, the new Speaking with Wit show. And I just encourage people to get involved. Don't be passive in this, to get involved. Encourage your daughters, if you're a father of a daughter of any age, help them to find ways to cope with the negativity that is out there, the peer pressure that pushes against it. Encourage them, continue to do that. It's what helps them to build the strength to continue in an IT field. It's what I drew on, that and the fantastic support system that I have in the SharePoint community to continue my journey. But read about it, talk about it, ask questions, and just make a pledge, do something, anything over the next 365 days to make a change. Awesome. Well, Cathy, thank you very much for coming on the show to talk about this with us, with our listeners today. I mean, this has been very interesting for me personally, and I'm really curious to hear what our listeners have to say as well. And so if you've tuned into this episode, please make sure that you let us know what you thought. Leave a review for us, but I mean, really let us know what you thought about for the show. Send us a tweet at MS Cloud Show, or also reach out to Cathy, CatPaint1 on Twitter. Right, Cathy? That's right. That's correct, right? That's correct. You can also find me at catpaint1@live.com if it makes it easier. Awesome. Well, hey, cool, Cathy. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and we're looking forward to working on the podcast with you going forward and getting that launched. And we'll let everybody know once we find that. I'm really excited. Thank you. Cool. Thank you. Did you like this episode? Send us a tweet about it and drop us a 5-star review in iTunes. Word-of-mouth recommendations are the most effective ways for us to grow the show. We'd really appreciate it. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text. We'll record it as a WAV or an MP3 and provide a link so that we can play your question on the show. Our theme music is an excerpt from Evaporated Air by Monk Turner, used under Creative Commons. You can subscribe to us in iTunes and the Google Play Store by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find show notes of each episode. You can also find us on Facebook, searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. And finally, sign up to our mailing list by heading to our website and entering your email to interact with us, participate in upcoming interviews, and other cool stuff. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.